All right, the first thing we will look at is the innate immune system, and it has really three parts. It has the physical parts, like your skin, that are incredibly important, right? If you get burned all over your body, if you survive the shock and the fluid loss, you really have trouble surviving the bacterial infections that will follow, right? So skin is critically important, and that's just a physical barrier. But there's also chemical things, and then we'll spend most of our time looking at the cellular barriers to infection. So skin, again, the way it typically works is the cells grow from the basal layer. These stem cells divide, and they push the keratinocytes and melanocytes towards the superficial surface here. So they slowly move up. They keratinize, and then bit by bit they slough off and fall away. Okay, why? Well, because constantly things are falling on our skin, you get bacteria on it, and fungal spores and everything else. And if the skin cells up here fall off and float away in the wind, they take all of that away from you. So your skin sloughing off is an important part of your immune system. Likewise, the mucous membranes have mucus that is secreted, and it traps microorganisms, and your cilia can push it towards your digestive system. And anything trapped in the mucus is killed in your stomach. That's the idea. That's what we use to protect our respiratory system. That mucus traps the microorganism. And then we have chemicals. So specific molecules that protect us also, and they're part of the innate immune system. They're produced all the time, and they don't target any one particular microorganism. The only one I really care about here is dried sweat. So dried sweat reduces the water activity of skin, so that most microorganisms that we might think about can't grow on skin, can't survive on skin. But some that you have heard of, like Staphylococcus aureus, can survive on skin, and that's why we have such a tight relationship with Staphylococcus aureus and Staphylococcus epidermidis. They can survive this relatively low water activity. And then the last chemical thing I'm going to show you, the last chemical barrier, is interferons, type 1 interferons. These are just signaling molecules that are released by any cell that detects a virus, and they signal nearby cells to turn on general antiviral defenses. So if a cell realizes it's infected, it will release interferons, and nearby cells will activate their antiviral responses, such as barriers to transcription of DNA, barriers to translation of RNA. They degrade viral RNA, and generally slowing down what the cells do, so that if the cells become virion factories, they can't be very efficient virion factories. So that's one of the chemical defenses we have. The cellular defenses we have include phagocytosis and the actions of natural killer cells. So we're going to start with phagocytosis. And again, you know phagocytosis. It's a form of endocytosis, or vesicular transport, where a cell can wrap its membrane around an object and pull it into the cell within a vesicle. We call this specific kind of vesicle a phagosome, and what happens is lysosomes will fuse with it, and they will release their digestive enzymes and their reactive oxygen molecules, and they will break down whatever is in the phagosome. So it becomes a phagolysosome, and whatever is in it gets broken down and can be released by released by exocytosis. Or proteins from inside here can get loaded onto major histocompatibility complex and displayed to T cells as antigens. So this would be the source of a lot of antigens that would be displayed to T cells. So again, there are two purposes of phagocytosis. One of them is to kill microorganisms directly. And macrophages are doing this all the time. They're cleaning out our tissues, but also if they run into bacteria, they kill them. And neutrophils do this to kill bacteria. It's a major part of the immune system. It's one way we find out what's going on in the body is macrophages and dendritic cells do phagocytosis and then present antigens to adaptive immune cells. So they will communicate with T cells as part of the adaptive immune response, and what they're communicating is, hey, I found this thing in my phagosome. What is it? Is it important? That's the question they're going to always ask a T cell. We will get there. So one thing I want to show you is that every pathogen you can think of has a way of avoiding phagocytosis. And you don't need to learn this. I just wanted to show you. Trichomonas is a sexually transmitted protist that can physically get away from phagocytes because it never penetrates tissues. It just lives in the mucus. Lots of bacteria disguise themselves as self, so they just avoid being detected. Some of them can have, these things we've talked about prevent phagocytosis. So a lot of pathogens have those. Some of them will get into a macrophage. They'll be eaten through phagocytosis, but then they will send signals that prevent lysosomes from fusing with the phagosome. And this is really common. So a lot of intracellular pathogens do this. Others just escape from the phagolysosome. They just break out of it. They don't care. And some of them actually just really don't care. They can survive inside the phagolysosome. So, again, phagocytosis is part of our innate immune system, but pathogens can handle that. It's not something that stops a pathogen. And some bacteria actually hunt and kill macrophages. So what are the cells that actually do it? Macrophages are a big one. They circulate in the blood as monocytes, and then they invade tissues as macrophages, and they will patrol tissues for months. They're super cool. So one of their jobs is to scavenge tissues. Like if one of your cells goes through programmed cell death, a macrophage will recycle it and make its contents available to nearby cells if they want to use them. But it's also going to clean up whatever it finds, like bacteria and virions and cell debris. And again, macrophages are antigen-presenting cells, as you will see. They will present antigens to T cells. Neutrophils are also defensive cells, and they are more specialized. Lots of them circulate in your blood, and they will go to a site of infection and aggressively do phagocytosis to kill bacteria or other microorganisms at the site of infection. That's really all they do, is attack invaders at the site of infection. They have other behaviors, but they're all localized to the site of infection. And they don't do anything else. They don't clean up tissues. They don't communicate with adaptive immunity. They just kill stuff. Dendritic cells are the third type of phagocytes. So macrophages, neutrophils, and dendritic cells are the types of macrophages. Are the types of phagocytes. Dendritic cells are kind of wild because they are innate cells that use the same innate receptors that neutrophils and macrophages use, but their only function is to communicate to the adaptive immune system. So dendritic cells keep track of what's in our blood and what's in our gut, and what's in our tissues, and they bring that to T cells. Their whole job is to present antigens to adaptive immune cells, and they move through the body. So they'll move from wherever they are, carrying a whole bunch of antigens to the nearest lymph node where they will communicate with T cells. So here's a review slide. There are also natural killer cells we'll talk about later, because you have to understand parts of adaptive immunity to understand how these work, but you'll see how they are innate. And then there are also phagocytic cells that are specific to different parts of the body, specifically central nervous system or the liver, but none of my immunology books even mention them ever, so we're not getting into them here. So that's the three major parts of the innate immune system: physical, chemical, and cellular. So you should know phagocytic cells. That's the cellular part of the innate immune system. And in the next video, we will look at how phagocytes know what they're supposed to eat. So I'll see you there.